The silence before injustice is louder than thunder. A soft hand clutches a boarding pass, trembling. Behind her, polished shoes tap marble. In front, a luxury gate glows with names never meant for hers. Her smile is fragile, her dress humble, her eyes proud. And then a voice cold, dismissive, drenched in entitlement. Newark International buzzed like a hive of polished indifference. I end the corner of the Polaris Lounge, where the air smelled of privilege and imported cologne. Mama Ruth Langston, 74, sat alone in a worn floral dress. She clutched a small leather purse with both hands, her back straight like she was still wearing her nurse's uniform. Her boarding pass said, Seat 1A, First Class, to Paris, a gift from her son, a miracle, she'd whispered, her first time beyond the Atlantic. The lounge was all steel and silence. Men in gray suits murmured mergers. Women with $1,000 handbags stared past her like she wasn't even real. Mama Ruth didn't flinch. She had held the hands of dying patients, raised children through riots and recession. This trip was not stolen. It was earned. In her bag, tucked beside a pocket Bible and a half-used lip balm, sat a letter from her son. You carried me. Now let me carry you. She had folded it 6 times. Now it was soft at the edges. Like her, the gate agent smiled politely. Have a wonderful flight, Mrs. Langston. She nodded, whispering a thank you laced with reverence. This wasn't just a journey. It was justice wrapped in velvet. The jet bridge smelled like metal and memory. As she stepped onto the aircraft, her eyes widened at the quiet luxury. Leather so soft it looked like water, lights like blue moonlight. She found her seat, 1A, window, placed her small carry-on overhead, sat slowly, smiled gently. That's when the voice came. Sharp, clipped, white. Ma'am, I think you're in the wrong section. Mama Ruth turned. A tall flight attendant, blonde, polished, and perfectly rigid, stood over her. Her badge read Christine. Her eyes didn't smile. This is first class, she said, her voice wrapped in sugar and steel. Perhaps you meant economy? Mama Ruth blinked. This is my seat. Christine's eyes did a quick scan. Worn dress, thrifted shoes, tired face. Her smirk flickered for just a moment. There must be a mistake, she said. Let me help you find your actual seat. She reached forward to guide, but it felt like a shove. Mama Ruth didn't move. Her voice was soft, but it landed like a stone. I said this is my seat. Christine didn't like that. She straightened, lips tight. These seats are reserved for our premium clients. Ma'am, I need you to check your boarding pass again. With shaking hands but firm gaze, Mama Ruth handed it over. Christine barely looked, then smiled fake, bright, deadly. Sometimes the system glitches, she said. Come on, let's sort this out. Economy is just a few steps away. Passengers began to glance over their screens. A man in a navy suit folded his paper. A woman clutched her lapdog tighter. The air changed. It always does when judgment enters the room. I'm not moving, Mama Ruth said. She didn't raise her voice, but something inside her, something holy, stood up tall. My son bought this ticket. For my birthday. That line, my son bought this, made Christine laugh. Not loudly, just enough to slice. Well, bless his heart, she said, tilting her head. But these seats are expensive. The meaning was sharp. You don't look like you belong. You're not what first class looks like. You're not white. You're not welcome. Mama Ruth sat still, breathing through a lifetime of familiarity with that tone. She'd heard it in grocery stores, in hospitals, in waiting rooms, but never in the sky, never here. I'll wait, she said calmly. In my seat. Christine's smile vanished. Then I'll have to call security. Mama Ruth looked straight ahead, her hands folded tight. Behind her silence, a storm had already begun. The tension wrapped around the cabin like fog, quiet, thick, unwelcome. Mama Ruth sat in her rightful seat, unmoving, though every inch of her felt exposed. She wasn't new to this kind of confrontation. She was just tired of it, tired of being questioned, tired of earning every inch, and tired of having to prove she belonged. Christine, now flushed with something deeper than frustration, moved toward the galley, her heels snapping against the floor like judgment. From a corner of her eye, Ruth saw her whisper to a younger attendant. The girl, Mira, her badge said, looked startled. Her eyes flicked to Ruth, then dropped fast. Nobody said a word. Not the suited man across the aisle. Not the woman with perfect nails and colder eyes. They all watched the scene unfold, their silence choosing a side. Ruth turned her gaze toward the window. The tarmac below shimmered in the midday sun. Somewhere on the horizon, a silver-winged dream waited. But for now, she was just a problem in seat 1A. She reached into her purse, fingers brushing past a folded letter again. Instead, she pulled out her phone, hands trembling, and stared at the name on top, Malik's son. She didn't want to call him, not because he wouldn't come, but because she shouldn't have to. Then Christine returned, smiling now. The corporate kind, the one that meant she decided how this would go. We're still sorting out the confusion, she said too loudly, glancing toward other passengers. But for now, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to sit in the rear until we verify everything. Mama Ruth stayed still. This is my seat, she repeated, her voice as calm as ever. I'm not going anywhere. A pause. Then Christine leaned in closer, her voice no longer pretending. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, you'll be removed from the aircraft, and I'll make sure that happens. That's when Ruth touched her phone. She tapped his name. Just once. And waited. Miles away, in a private conference room atop a Manhattan skyscraper, Malik Langston stared down at the negotiation table. 10 suits, 2 screens, and the hum of billion-dollar decisions. He wasn't just another executive. He was the president and founder of Airline Aviation Group, one of the fastest-growing black-owned airline consortiums in the world. Polaris Airlines, Royal Wings, Aerolux, they all sat beneath his hand. He was precise, cold when needed. But when his phone buzzed and he saw his mother's name, something in his spine snapped alert. "Excuse me," he said, already standing. The boardroom murmured, confused. He didn't wait to explain. He answered, "Mom, everything okay?" Ruth's voice cracked his ear. "I'm on the plane, but they think I don't belong here." Malik froze. His world, one built on control, success, and vision, suddenly narrowed to one word, belong. "What's happening?" he asked, low and sharp. She told him everything in 2 sentences. And that was enough. Malik turned on his heel, walking out mid-sentence as the CFO tried to protest. He didn't care. He was already texting his assistant, already firing off names, contacts, locations. "Don't move, Mama," he said into the phone. "I'll fix this." She sighed, eyes misting. "I just wanted to see Paris." "And you will?" Malik said. "But first, someone's going to learn what happens when they disrespect a woman who raised me." He hung up, and the world moved. Back on the plane, Ruth sat still, eyes closed now. She felt the judgment like tiny knives on her back. Mira, the younger attendant, passed again, her hands full of drinks for the passengers who had stayed comfortably silent. She didn't look at Ruth, but she left a water bottle on her tray table. No eye contact, no words, just the gesture, quiet, apologetic. IT didn't fix anything, but it was something, and right now, Ruth held on to every something she could find. Christine returned once more, a fake smile stitched back across her lips. "Ma'am, if you insist on staying, we'll need to escalate this." Ruth looked her in the eye. "You go ahead," she said, "but be very sure who you're escalating it to." Christine scoffed. "I've been head purser for 12 years. I know who belongs where." Ruth smiled, but there was steel in it now. "Then today's the day you learn something new." Outside the cabin, a whisper traveled down the gate. A late passenger was coming. A VIP, unexpected. Last minute, override. No one knew who it was. Only that someone important enough to delay departure was minutes away. And inside seat 1A, a mother waited. Not for Paris. Not for luxury. But for truth to walk through the door, and for power to finally sit where it belonged. 35,000 feet still grounded. The aircraft hadn't moved, but the cabin felt like it was sinking. Passengers murmured, not about the injustice they'd just witnessed, but about the delay. Time was money, and a black woman holding seat 1A was costing them both. Christine kept pacing. Her smile was gone, replaced by a frown she tried to mask with efficiency. She had pulled out her tablet now, fingers dancing over the screen. Each swipe a search for validation, each tap an attempt to erase Ruth from where she sat. The manifest didn't lie. Ruth Langston, seat 1A, paid in full. But Christine didn't step back. She couldn't. She wouldn't. Because admitting Ruth belonged meant admitting something uglier, that the face Christine had deemed wrong had every right to sit in the very front of the sky. Mira stood in the galley, watching, silent. Younger, softer, maybe wiser. She hadn't intervened. She hadn't defended. But something in her eyes said she wished she had. Ruth sat with her hands folded neatly. She hadn't cried. Not yet. But her face was different now. Still, hardened. She had been through things like this before. Segregated schools. Hospitals that wouldn't hire her. The day Malik came home with his shirt torn because a cop thought he'd stolen his own bicycle. Injustices wore different uniforms now, but they still asked the same question. Are you sure you belong? She thought about her son, how he used to bring her old thermometers to fix. As a boy, he had always tried to heal broken things. Now she was the one cracked. Her phone buzzed once in her palm. Malik. 15 minutes. Don't move. At the terminal entrance, black-tinted glass doors slid open and swallowed a storm. Malik Langston didn't walk. He surged. No entourage. No briefcase. Just presence. The gate agent nearly dropped a scanner when he recognized him. Mr. Langston, we weren't aware. You don't need to be aware. Just get me on the plane. A flurry of calls began behind him. Managers, supervisors, someone from corporate. Too late. The storm had already boarded. The captain was alerted mid-pre-flight. He blinked at the name, unsure if it was real. Polaris Airlines founding CEO, on a shared code-share partner flight. No protocol prepared for this. Back in seat 1A, Ruth didn't look up when Christine returned. Ma'am, Christine said, lips taut. I've spoken with the captain. If you continue to resist relocation, we'll have no choice but to remove you from the flight for security reasons. She spoke louder now, louder than necessary, louder so everyone could hear. Passengers leaned forward, not to help, but to watch. IT was entertainment now, an uncomfortable sideshow, a morality play at 30 rows deep. Ruth breathed slow, her chest barely moving. I have nothing to prove, she said softly. But I do have someone to call. Christine rolled her eyes. You already tried that, and I'm still standing here. No, Ruth whispered, but he's about to be. Christine turned, prepared to head back to the galley, but she froze halfway because the front door of the aircraft had opened, and silence swept through the cabin like a hush before thunder. In stepped a tall man in charcoal black, tailored suit, no tie, wrath wrapped in stillness. His presence wasn't loud, but it was final. Christine took a step forward, still unsure. Welcome aboard, sir. May I help? Malik didn't even look at her. His eyes were already locked on Ruth. Everything else, Christine, the crew, the first-class passengers, blurred into background. He walked straight down the aisle like the floor itself knew who he was. Ruth didn't move, but her eyes welled. When Malik knelt beside her and took her hands, she didn't speak, just held on like the world had started to balance again. You okay, Mama? Her lips trembled. I didn't want to bother you. You didn't, he said. She did. He stood, straightened, turned. Now his gaze landed on Christine, and it didn't blink. You're Christine? It wasn't a question. Christine nodded, her confidence shrinking like paper in fire. And you're the one who thought my mother didn't belong here? There it was, not rage, not volume, just the quiet devastation of truth delivered by a man with the power to rearrange the sky. Passengers shrank in their seats. The suited man who had earlier folded his paper now pretended to check emails. The woman with the dog looked down like her own shame was barking now. Christine tried to recover. Sir, I was only trying to confirm. Confirm what? Malik asked. That a black woman in Sunday shoes can't sit in first class? She opened her mouth, then closed it, because no apology would reach high enough now. Let me be very clear, Malik said. You've humiliated my mother. You've insulted my family. And you've done it while carrying the name of an airline that shares a contract with mine. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small black card, and held it up. The silver foil letters shimmered like a warning. Malik Langston, President. Airline Aviation Group. There was no turbulence, no engine whine. But inside that cabin, everything dropped. Christine stared at the card, then at him, then at Ruth, and for the first time all day, she looked truly afraid. Not of losing a job, but of finally facing the truth she refused to see, that the world was watching. And this time, it wasn't looking away. Christine stood frozen in place, the power vacuum collapsing around her. The woman she dismissed had become a symbol, and the man she had underestimated now stood inches away. Not just a CEO, but the son of the woman she tried to erase. Malik didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He turned to the gate agent, who had just stepped in, breathless from running. Get the captain. Now! Christine tried to interrupt, to pivot, to soften, to save herself, but Malik cut her off with just a look. You had a choice, he said flatly, and you made it. Around them, the passenger sat still, caught in the gravity of something bigger than comfort or delay. It was no longer about a seat. It was about everything that seat represented. Power, access, dignity, and who gets to have it. Minutes later, the captain arrived. Pressed uniform, graying temples, practiced smile. He stopped short when he saw Malik. Mr. Langston? I was informed. No, Malik said. You weren't, but you're informed now. The captain cleared his throat. We were told there was a seating issue. A seating issue? Malik echoed, tilting his head. Is that what we're calling it? He glanced at Ruth, who remained seated, quiet, unwavering. This woman, he said slowly, is my mother, a retired nurse, a mother of 3, a paying first-class passenger. And she was publicly humiliated because your lead flight attendant didn't think someone who looked like her could belong up here. The captain paled. Around him, 2 other flight attendants had appeared, including Mira, eyes wide and worried. Malik addressed them all now. I want every member of this crew to answer one question. Did any of you intervene? Silence. Then Mira stepped forward, voice trembling. I should have. I knew it was wrong. I just didn't know what to do. Malik nodded once, and no anger. Just disappointment heavy enough to crush the air between them. You don't need to raise your voice to take a side, he said. Christine finally spoke, her voice suddenly soft, almost childlike. It was a misunderstanding. Malik turned to her, eyes like glass. No, it wasn't. Don't do that. She blinked. I didn't mean to. I was just trying to protect. Protect what? He snapped. The cabin? The sanctity of leather seats? Or your comfort at the sight of someone you didn't expect? Her mouth opened, then closed. The truth sat in her silence. Malik took out his phone, dialed, waited. This is Langston, he said. Begin internal review protocol. United 408. Employee name, Christine Holloway. I want her entire file. Any prior complaints, verbal or written, and flagged his flight for senior compliance audit. He hung up without waiting for questions. Christine took a step back. I have a family, she said, voice cracking. I've worked here for years. I didn't think. That's the problem, Malik said, voice like stone. You didn't think. You assumed. He turned back to the captain. From this point forward, she is to be removed from passenger service, confined to the crew area. No further interaction. Yes, sir, the captain said. Quiet. Ashen. Mira stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Christine's arm. Christine didn't resist. She walked slowly down the aisle like someone approaching their own funeral. The cabin didn't applaud. It didn't speak. It just watched, complicit, silent, ashamed. Malik stood still for a moment, then looked at the remaining passengers, each of whom had once ignored Ruth, once entertained the idea that maybe she didn't belong. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He just said this. If you saw what happened and said nothing, that says something. And then he turned to his mother. Her eyes had not left him, but now, finally, they softened. I didn't want you to have to come, she whispered. I didn't have to, he replied. I chose to. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, the gesture so simple, yet echoed louder than any intercom. In the back, Christine sat in the dim crew rest area, hands shaking, breath shallow. She scrolled through her phone. Messages were already coming in, from colleagues, from supervisors, from strangers who had started filming the confrontation. Her name trending, her face captured, her voice recorded. One video, posted just 10 minutes ago, already had over 2 million views. The caption was brutal. She told the wrong black mother to move. Christine stared blankly, not at the screen, at herself, and she didn't like what she saw. At the front of the plane, Malik stayed beside his mother until she smiled again, not out of victory, but peace. The peace of someone no longer forced to defend the dignity she never should have had to prove. Outside, the runway finally cleared. The wheels began to roll, and the flight to Paris, delayed by prejudice, lifted at last. But inside that cabin, something heavier than the plane had already taken off. 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin still hadn't recovered. First class had all the luxuries money could buy, but none of them could soften the silence. The hum of the engines, the clink of glassware, the whisper of crisp uniforms, all of it felt muted under the weight of what had just unfolded. Every passenger sat in a private storm of their own making. Guilt, shame, or worse, indifference reluctantly stirred awake. Ruth, still in seat 1A, now had a glass of sparkling water beside her and a fresh, warm blanket folded gently across her lap. Not from Christine, of course. Mira had brought it over, her hands trembling slightly. "Is there anything else I can get you, Mrs. Langston?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ruth looked up at her, not coldly, not with anger, just a long, searching gaze. Then she said simply, "Speak up next time. Not for me, for yourself." Mira nodded, eyes glistening, and walked away. Malik had taken the seat behind his mother now. His phone lit up every few seconds. Messages from reporters, screenshots of headlines, internal alerts from his PR team, corporate stakeholders asking for statements. But for the first time in a long time, he let it all wait. Instead, he sat in stillness, watching his mother sip her water and read from the book of poetry she always carried. Everything he had ever built, every boardroom, every milestone, was for her. He could move markets. He could bend contracts. But even with all his power, he still couldn't stop a white uniform from seeing her as unworthy. That truth burned deeper than any headline. In the galley, Mira whispered to another flight attendant. Her name was Naomi, and she'd only been flying for a year. "What Christine did, it's not the first time," Mira said quietly. Naomi's brows lifted. "You serious?" Mira nodded. She's had complaints before. Minor stuff. Microaggressions. But it was always dismissed. Brushed off. And now? Naomi asked. Mira looked toward the rest area, where Christine sat alone, head in her hands. "Now," she said. She finally got seen. Back in first class, Richard Hale, the sharply dressed man who had earlier chuckled at Ruth's arrival, was sweating through his collar. He was more than just a passenger. He was a senior catering liaison for Hale Hospitality, a contracted vendor for Polaris Airlines, Malik's Airlines. When Malik had arrived, Richard had tried to sink into his seat, to shrink away from his earlier smirks and eye rolls. But now he knew it was too late. He had laughed at Ruth, had rolled his eyes when Christine called her out, had said nothing, done nothing, when truth sat right beside him, and Malik had seen him. He was sure of it. The captain made an announcement, voice polite but cautious. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to apologize once again for the delay earlier. We thank you for your patience and understanding. A full statement will be issued upon landing. In coach, there were no complaints. In fact, a ripple of applause broke out, awkward but heartfelt. News had traveled fast. Even before takeoff, someone in 23A had uploaded a video. A woman with a child on her lap whispered, "That's the CEO's mama." A man across the aisle added, "And she handled it better than I ever could." The entire back of the plane seemed united in a quiet solidarity. But in first class, silence. They weren't used to being on the wrong side of the story. Malik finally stood, walked to the front, took the intercom mic from Myra's hesitant hand. The cabin waited. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't clear his throat. He just spoke, plain, clear, honest. Some of you may be wondering what happened before this flight left the ground. You witnessed it. You watched it. Some of you stayed silent. Some looked away. My mother, Ruth Langston, was told she didn't belong here, not because of her boarding pass, but because of her skin, her age, her appearance. The woman who said it is now off duty. But this flight didn't just carry her mistake. It carried your reactions. I built an airline from the ground up. I walk into rooms people said I'd never see. But this is why I built it. So no one's mother ever feels like she needs permission to sit where she paid to sit. The entire plane, front to back, fell into breathless stillness. A few clapped in economy. In first class, guilt pressed harder than gravity. Back in the crew rest area, Christine heard it all, every word like a gavel. She covered her ears, but too late. The truth had landed. She wasn't a victim. She was a mirror, and what she had reflected onto Ruth was now reflecting right back at her. As Malik returned to his seat, Ruth reached out and took his hand. She didn't say much. Just, "You didn't have to say all that." He looked at her, the edge still soft in his voice. "I did, because they weren't just looking at you, Mama. They were watching what I do." The city of Paris twinkled below like a sea of fractured stars. Inside seat 1A, Ruth Langston sat with her hands folded in her lap, the corner of her mouth lifted in the faintest smile. Not a smile of triumph, a smile of arrival. After a lifetime of being told where she could and could not go, she was finally floating above borders, not just countries, but boundaries drawn by prejudice. The meal had been served, the champagne poured. But what filled her most wasn't food or drink. It was the stillness, the peace of knowing she hadn't backed down, of knowing her son hadn't just built a company. He had built a voice loud enough to silence injustice mid-flight. Christine never returned to the cabin. She stayed tucked inside the crew rest area, curled around regret, her face bathed in the blue glow of headlines. Her name printed beside shame. Her phone buzzed with calls she no longer had the courage to answer. She scrolled past clips of herself arguing, pointing, dismissing. Clips of Ruth, quiet, calm, dignified, simply sitting, doing nothing more than existing in a place someone decided she wasn't allowed. And for the first time, Christine understood she hadn't enforced a rule. She had revealed a bias, one she didn't even know she'd nurtured until the mirror cracked. Meanwhile, Richard Hale sat in silence. He didn't drink the scotch he'd ordered, didn't open his laptop, just sat hollow. His company's contract with Airline Aviation was already under review. He knew it was coming, knew his snide glances, his folded arms, his subtle smirks. They had been noticed. He wasn't the villain, but he wasn't innocent either. That was a lesson no one liked. You don't have to throw the stone to be part of the destruction. Sometimes silence is complicity. Sometimes stillness screams. Hours later, the wheels touched down. Paris sparkled through the glass as the aircraft taxied toward the gate. Malik stayed beside Ruth as the cabin began to stir. Passengers rising, adjusting ties, unzipping overhead bins. He watched the people who had ignored her for 9 hours suddenly pretend they hadn't seen anything at all. But one woman paused, the same one who had once clutched her designer dog like armor. She looked at Ruth and gave a slow, respectful nod. Not friendship, not apology, but acknowledgement. Ruth nodded back. That was enough. Outside, the jet bridge hissed open. Malik offered his arm. Let's go see Paris, Mama. She stood, slowly, gracefully, stepping onto foreign soil like a queen who had just reclaimed her crown. Later that night, the penthouse of Hotel du Lune stood silent. Velvet curtains, golden lamps, a city of light just beyond the glass. Ruth stood on the balcony, wrapped in a soft robe, tea in hand. She watched the Eiffel Tower sparkle against the indigo sky and exhaled, the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding for decades. Inside, Malik stood behind her. "You did good today," he said. "I was scared," she replied. "Not of her. Of me. Of who I start to believe I am when someone looks at me like that." Malik placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not the reflection." She looked at him. "No, I'm yours." And that truth, that single quiet line, carried more weight than any speech in any boardroom. 2 days later, the story broke. CEO shuts down racist airline incident mid-flight. She bought that seat, the woman who changed the skies. Hashtag first-class justice began trending. Some praised, some doubted, some politicized. But the video was undeniable. The silence in the cabin, the voice that cut through it, the face of a 74-year-old black woman, soft and strong, sitting quietly in her rightful place. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't stood on a table. She had simply refused to move, and the world moved around her. Weeks later, Malik held a press conference. Standing beside Ruth, he announced the Langston Project, a multi-million-dollar initiative for racial equity in global travel, mandatory anti-bias training for all partner airlines, a global passenger dignity hotline, scholarships for minority youth pursuing careers in aviation and hospitality. He ended with this: "My mother spent 40 years helping others breathe. The least I can do is make sure the air she walks through now is finally clean." Ruth never asked to become a symbol, but symbols don't ask. They rise when the world needs them. And sometimes justice doesn't come from fire. It comes from a woman in a floral dress, sitting quietly in seat 1A, refusing to shrink. The most dangerous lie is the one that whispers you're not enough. But the most powerful truth is the one that says you never needed permission to belong.